All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the SkyTown Pod, the Chicago Sky and WNBA podcast. We're back here on Apple Podcasts and YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. If you're on Apple Podcasts, drop a rating. Share the podcast with your friends, all that sort of stuff. If you like, my name is Garrett. I am the host, and we're back for episode 4, I think. It's been a couple weeks since the last episode. This is still a very new thing. I'm just doing for fun. I'm obviously not making any money or anything off this right now. So life got in the way for a little bit. I was on vacation for a little bit for my birthday. Just had some other things going on. And as it's been in many places across the United States this last week or so, it's been super, super hot. And haven't really just been feeling up to recording the podcast, but finally gotten to a point where I've just really wanted to get this done. It's still super hot. You guys might be able to hear the fan a little bit in the background, so I apologize. And if you're watching on YouTube, I'm just wearing a plain white tee, keeping it really simple to try and stay as cool as possible here in my nice little Chicago apartment. But I'm hopeful with that time off. I've actually had a bit of time to research some stuff. There is a decent amount to talk about because it has been so long since the last one. And there have been some really interesting updates with the team and with the league over the last couple weeks. So going to go over some of the things we're talking about as I get out my handy dandy notebook here, go over my run sheet. A lot of folks like to have their run sheets electronic, but I'm a little old fashioned. So on this episode, we're doing the quarter season check-in. We're going to go over, talk a little bit about all the games that happened between our last episode and now, and also kind of take a holistic look at all of the games. And I want to compare that to last year because a big narrative around the Sky this year is the coaching and those changes from Teresa Witherspoon's team last year to Tyler Marsh's teams this year. So we'll take a look at that, compare those stats, compare those numbers, and see if we can kind of reason out what might be some of the differences that we're looking at here. Then we'll move on from that into what are some things that we can do, or where is this team, I guess would be a better way, at the quarter season, and how would I react if I was in the position of the coaches or the front office regarding this team, and what might be some plans for the future for this team going into the rest of this season and potentially going into next off season in reaction to what we've seen so far, and wrapping up with some news from around the league, talking a little bit about an update on Sonia Citron, our old friend, the 3rd overall pick in the draft that could have belonged to the Sky. And rookies in general are starting to be a big story this year. A lot of are playing really, really, really well, going along with what I've said in several episodes, that the overall value of the WNBA draft pick is just much higher than it's been in the past. Talk about the Sun and the Fever game, which was some big news, go over some standings, talk about some injuries as well, because that has been another big story in the W this year, more than it has been in some past recent seasons, I think. So all that to look forward to and more in this episode. But let's start out with the Sky themselves. Now, I have a bunch of stats here from the quarter season, which will technically be like 11 games because it's a 44-game season, but these are from 13 games in, and the Sky just yesterday, from when I'm recording this, beat the Sparks, win number 4 on the season. So this is now 2 episodes in a row where the Sky are coming off wins, which always puts you in a good mood. The last episode, the Sky were coming off back-to-back wins against the Dallas Wings, which was really nice, but they were against a really bad team, and it proved to not be super sustainable as the Sky followed that up with blowout losses to the Fever without Caitlin Clark, which was pretty embarrassing, to the Liberty, to the Dream, and then came back with a win against the Sun, another pretty bad team, and then followed that up with a really close loss against the Mystics, really one of the first close losses of the year. They had another somewhat close loss against the Sparks earlier in the season, but even that was 13 points. This just a 7-point loss to the Mystics, a game where the Sky were actually in the game for most of it and had a lead. I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, had a lead late and were unable to hold on to it. Really tough loss, especially having the momentum coming out of the Connecticut Sun game. I was really hopeful that game against the Mystics would be really one of the first. I don't even know if you could call it a statement win, because the Mystics are not exactly one of the top teams in the league. They're sitting at 7-8 right now, just under 500, but it would be this guy's first win against a team that's not just one of the bottom rung teams, and a chance to prove that they can be in that kind of middle muck in the standings and potentially compete for a lower playoff spot. Weren't able to get that done. Then had another blowout loss to the Mercury, and then a loss to the Dream on Sunday the 22nd, which ended up being a 13-point loss. But that was a game that was actually really close almost all the way through. And then unfortunately a bad fourth quarter led to a double-digit loss, which is another narrative that was starting to form in some of these games, where the Sky has started to be more competitive in these games through one quarter, even a half, and sometimes going into three quarters, but just late in the third quarters and in the fourth quarters, as the game progressed, not being able to sustain their effort level, sustain their execution, and blowing these leads in the second half of these games. But all that changed Tuesday, June 24th, Pride Night. Let's go against the Los Angeles Sparks, where the Sparks were winning by as much as 14 points, and the Sky didn't get their first lead of the game until there was about 8 minutes left in the fourth quarter, 7 or 8 minutes left in the fourth quarter, and they end up keeping that momentum going, outscore the Sparks 30-17 in the fourth quarter, and end up coming away with an 11-point win. So a huge turnaround from that Sparks game earlier in the season, where it was the Sky that had that early lead in the first half and then solely saw it go away over the course of the second half. This was a really great win for the team, just because at this point any win is a good win, but it also showed that they could have a little bit of fight in them, and that's something that I think has been a bit of a criticism of this team when you look at a lot of the blowout losses that this team has had, that they didn't have the same fight as Teresa Witherspoon-led team did last year. And this was a game where they were down for the vast majority of it, but they never gave up. They stayed together. They kept their effort level up and even increased their effort level at certain times when they needed to, and were able to come all the way back and end up coming away with a double-digit win with that second half performance, which is a period where they've typically been struggling this year. Now, the downside of this is once again against one of the bottom rung teams in the league. The Sparks fall to 4-11 with this game, and the Sky are now 4-10. So basically the same record. The Sparks have had one more game or played one more game than the Sky have, but they're all there bunched up at the bottom along with the Sun and the Wing. So the Sky have kind of established that they're, I don't know, in some ways the best of the worst right now, but we've yet to see any win against a really quality team yet. And so in a little bit, we'll kind of talk over that, but I want to re-go over what we're looking at with this team so far this year. As we've just passed that quarter season mark, we can kind of check in at what's been happening. And I think this will be really interesting to look back at once we start getting to the halfway mark, we're hitting 20, 21, 22 games. And I'm really hopeful that we'll be able to see a dramatic difference in the stats between these first 11 games and those next 11 games, because I feel like just from watching the team, we've already seen substantial improvement just within this first quarter of the season. But it's not quite enough of a sample size to see that bear out in the stats just yet. And I'm really hopeful that they can continue building, and that in those next 11 games, we'll really be able to see the growth between the first 11 and those second 11. Because I don't know, maybe it's just because we're coming off a win, but even in some of those losses, the Sky have been doing, I think, much better than they were in the first few games of the season. I do want to mention a couple of fun statistics from that Sparks game. Camila Cardoso, career high 27 points on 10 of 15 shooting, 6 of 8 from the free throw line, and 1 of 1 from 3-point range. Her first career made three-pointer. And this wasn't just the end of the game, they're up by a lot, but this was halfway through the third quarter as the Sky are trying to chip into this lead. This was a big three to cut it to a 3 or 2 point game at that time and help to keep the Sky in it. It was end of the shot clock, so she kind of had to shoot it, but it was still really cool to see. After the game in the press conference, one of the reporters asked, now that you made this one, is there anything we could do so that you can take more of these, since we know you can do it? And it's like, well, okay, let's slow down a little bit. She's still 6'7", one of the biggest, strongest players in the league. It would be great if she could hit a couple of outside jumpers every now and again, but let's not forget where her strength is. Angel had 18 points and 17 rebounds with 6 assists and 4 steals. Just a phenomenal all-around game, coming off the game against the Dream where she had 19 rebounds. And she's just been playing so much better over the last stretch of games. If you missed it, she had her first career triple-double in that win against the Connecticut Sun. And if you're primarily watch the NBA, there's a lot of players in the NBA that get a lot of triple doubles, and the triple double has become a little bit devalued in the NBA because of how common it's come, at least among a certain kind of player. But triple doubles in the WNBA are much rarer. Some of that is just because the games are shorter. They're almost 10 minutes shorter. They're only 40 minutes instead of 48. So it's just less opportunity to build up all those stats. But just the pace of the game and the way it's played at this current time, you don't see that a lot from players. And so it's really cool to see Angel have something like that this early in her career. And especially from a player who, her rookie year was not really known for her passing, even though that was something she's done in her past and in high school and a little bit in college. But it's just, I think, kind of a sign of, again, the incremental improvements this team has made. And when you look at this team at the beginning of the year, I mean, you could go up and down the roster, and it felt like basically everybody was just playing far below what they were capable of and what their career would show that they can do. And now I feel like when I'm watching this team, I'm seeing much more of the players play up to what you would expect them to based on their career. And some players, the ones you'd expect, finally showing some ways that they're developing and progressing past what they have in years past, like we see with Camila having that career game. And she had some really strong games previously as well. She had 17 points in the first half against the Phoenix Mercury, and then was basically pulled out the entire second half along with most of the starters because the game got really out of control. And the Sky had another game less than 24 hours after that, which is it's a really bizarre scheduling thing. Like, there have been weeks where the Sky have like 4 or 5 days in between games, and then you turn around and you have a game in Chicago at noon on Saturday, and then a game in Atlanta on where you're going. You're traveling down to Atlanta. You're going across time zones at 2:00 on Sunday. I mean, that's just crazy. That seems wild to me. I'm not sure how that happens, but it was really strange because you just don't see players sit out an entire second half like that. But I can at least a little bit understand where Tyler Marsh was coming from because of that weird scheduling thing, and the game was pretty out of hand at that point. That was a huge tangent. I just wanted to go back and check the box score, and it got me off on that whole thing about the incremental improvements we're having, and lots of players are playing better. But before we get too into that, let's go ahead and compare these stats, right? Because, hey, great win, but on the whole, it's been a bit of a struggle this year, and there's been a lot of comparison between Teresa Witherspoon, Tyler Marsh, and I wanted to take a look at really what the difference is here, because it's easy to have those rose-colored glasses, have that 2020 hindsight when what you're watching in the current time looks bad. So this is about 14 games into the season from 2024, and I have 13 games worth of stats for 2025. So it's mostly equivalent, but not quite. So 14 games in the season. Last year, Chicago Sky were 5-9. 14 games in the season this year, they're 4-10. So just one win difference. Points per game last year, they were averaging 79.5 points a game, and now they are averaging 76.5. So 3-point difference there. A little different, but I don't know if that's a huge difference. Field goal percentage, 42% for both teams. So even though it feels like in a lot of games this team has not been able to buy a bucket, it hasn't been any less efficient on the whole than last year's team. 3-point attempts per game. This was a big story last year. It was 14.2 last year. And this year, it's up to 20.8. But take a look at makes. 14.2 attempts last year, but 4.5 makes a game. So 20.8 attempts this year, 6.3 makes. So 6 more attempts per game, but only 1.5 or 2 more makes. Is that the most efficient? I don't know. I'm not a math whiz, but I feel like you'd like to have a few more than that. Rebounds, right about the same. 35.6 last year per game, 35.3 this year per game. So we're going up a lot of these numbers. Pretty similar offensive rating. 97 last year, 95.8 this year. So only just 1 point difference in that offensive rating. So, okay, we take a look at all these numbers. They're pretty similar. So is it just this team got unlucky? They haven't won as much as last year by 1 game. Is it all just, those pink shaded glasses? Well, no, because there's one thing we haven't quite talked about yet, and that is the defense. And we can take a look at the plus minus for this team. On average, how much are they being outscored or outscoring? And last year it was negative 1.1, 14 games into the season. This year is negative 11.9. So even though there's only 1 game difference in that win-loss record, that plus minus is showing that there's still a big difference between these two teams. And we can take a look at the defensive rating as well. Last year, 99.3 defensive rating, And this year it's 110.7, which is a pretty vast difference. That 99.3 last year was 5th in the league at that time. And this 110.7 is 12th in the league this year. So it's really that defensive side of the ball that has really slipped, which I think is why that narrative is out there that this team doesn't have fight, doesn't have that dog in them the way that they did last year, because it feels like they're just in these games and they just completely fall apart and they completely give up, and these leads just balloon into these huge numbers that you just didn't see happen last year. Sorry, to take a drink of water there. As I said, it's really hot. And I think that that's true. You take a look at the scores, 14 games into the season last year. 6 losses this isn't even the first 14 games. This is the whole season last year. 6 losses of 19 points or more. I picked 19 because if you go to 20, there's not very many games they lost by 20 points, but there's like 3 or 4 games they lost by 19. So I was like, let's just make it 19 because it'll make it more interesting to talk about. So 6 losses of 19 points or more all of last season, 42 games. This year, already 5 losses of 19 points or more, just 14 games into the season. So when this team's losing, they're really losing, and it feels like they're just not even close, which leads to this narrative of what the heck is going on. Why did we get rid of Teresa Witherspoon, and who the heck is this Tyler Marsh guy? So taking a look at that, we think about, what do we do the rest of the season? I already talked a little bit about this. I feel like we've seen incremental improvements from this team in a lot of ways. You watch this team play now, it doesn't feel like it's a bunch of high schoolers running around, not knowing how to play organized basketball. It looks like a real basketball team. They're competing in games now. And Tyler Marsh talked about this in the post game of the Sparks game, actually, which I thought was interesting, where he was talking about, what it means to be mentally strong. And he mentioned that he knows it can feel like when you look at these box scores and you look at these games where they're getting blown out, to say that this team is not mentally tough or not mentally strong. And he definitely said that this is something that he's trying to improve on with the team. But you can also take a look at it at the season level. And you can take a look at this team that's playing below expectations, below what they think that they or know that they're capable of, and is 3-10, now 4-10, and a team like that could totally just fall apart on each other. And we've already seen some other teams that are struggling this year, like the Sparks themselves. Kelsey Plum has had a number of kind of outbursts in the media complaining about treatment by the officials or this or that. And you've seen the Sun, who are really struggling this year, have that game against the Fever where they're just whacking people, all this stuff going on. And those are, part of sports. It happens, but it's signs of frustration, signs of, these are things that tend to happen when you're on a team that's struggling and you're frustrated at how the team's performing, and you got to get that out at some way. And you're not hearing that from this team. You're not seeing that from this team. You're not seeing people lash out on the court. In the media, we're hearing Ariel Atkins stick up for Angel Reese, stick up for her young teammates, and the way that they're carrying themselves and the way that they have stayed focused through attacks from the media and fans. Angel Reese is coming out, giving praise to the organization, giving praise to the coaches, giving praise to her teammates. This is not a team that sounds like they're fighting each other in the locker room, that they don't have it together. And I think that definitely you could take a look at last year's team compared to this year's team. And one of the struggles from this year, I think, has been finding an identity and what defines this team. And last year's team had a really strong identity. And so it's easy to connect to a team that has an identity. And this team is still kind of looking for that. And I think some of that is because, Teresa Witherspoon, as much as people might say about her X's and O's, really connected emotionally with the players. And I think it feels like that's maybe not Tyler Marsh's strength as much, and he's working to figure that out. But you can also see that on some level, there is some success with that, because even though this team has had these frustrating blowout losses, has a disappointing record this far in the season, they have stuck together and they're improving little by little, game by game, which I think is really hard to do. It's really hard in professional basketball to show that you're getting better in a game-by-game basis. Doing better in one game does not mean it's a habit, does not mean that it's going to stick. But we've seen this team consistently get better almost game by game. And you could take a look at last season, and again, 14 games through the season, they're 5-9, and they finished the season 13-27, including going 2-12 down the final 14 games of the season. Now, some of that has to do with the roster changes. Marina Maybury getting traded, which I think was a really great move for the team. So the team became a lot less talented, and that's going to result in more losses. But it's, again, a reminder, like, last year's team wasn't all that, right? Wasn't all that. There were some really fun games. Again, the games were closer, so they felt more exciting. But it wasn't all that, and ended very poorly. And I think this team has a chance to do the reverse and to start out in this 4-10 stretch to start the season could be the worst stretch of basketball that this team has. And that would be really awesome to be able to look back in this part of the year and be like, man, they really struggled to start the year, but look how much better they played towards the back half of the season, and maybe you finish up, closer to 500. That would be really awesome. I don't know. We'll see. But it feels like this team is trending in the right direction. They're staying together. Lots of people are playing better. We've seen lots of different starting lineups that they've messed around with. We've seen a starting lineup of Ariel Atkins, Rebecca Allen, Kia Nurse, along with Angel and Camilla, which I thought was a really interesting lineup because you're getting a lot of defensive flexibility and versatility in that lineup with Rebecca Allen and Kia Nurse. But Kia Nurse has been struggling a lot so far this year. I think as much as we've seen Michaela Onyenwere, who got off to a pretty slow start, have some really great games recently. Elizabeth Williams has been a huge contributor off the bench recently. Haley Van Lith she's seen her minutes go up and down. She's had some games where she's had 20, 25 minutes, some games where she's back down in that 5 to 10, but she's proven she can be a consistent part of the rotation. I think seeing her get around 15, 16 minutes a game would be a great place for her to settle for right now. And I think that, I don't know if she'll be a star in the future or not, but she's shown, I think, that she has the talent to at least be a contributor, maybe even a starter later on in her career, which is really great to see. But Kia has been the one player that is still really struggling right now and not playing up to the level that I'm sure she knows she's capable of. And so we'll see. It's tough when your minutes are getting bounced around a little bit, but we'll see if she can kind of get back on track over the next stretch of games here. But overall, everyone's kind of trending in the right direction. It feels like the team's trending in the right direction. But I still think there's a lot of important lessons to be taken from this from the front office. And one of the things I wanted to talk about with this section was the sense of process over results. And if you follow sports a lot, this is something you probably heard the coaches of your favorite teams talk about. It could even be some of the Sky coaches, but this is something that's becoming increasingly popular to talk about with coaches, and it's really important in a lot of different aspects of life in terms of being able to set yourself up for success mentally. And the idea is that when you're evaluating things, that you don't want to purely focus on the outcome and what happened, but you want to focus on how that came to be and what was the process to get there. So, for example, we can take a look at hiring Tyler Marsh as the coach. Now, I think you can look at firing Teresa Witherspoon and definitely take a look at that and say that the process to that seemed a little questionable, because based on the roster that this guy had last year, it seemed like she did a good job. That team had a really strong identity and they played really hard. And so firing her, I think we can all agree, was a bit of a surprise and kind of a head scratcher. But you can look at bringing in Tyler Marsh. I talked about this a little bit last episode. But this is a guy who has been an assistant coach for over a decade. He's coached and worked with some of the greatest minds in the men's and women's game. He spent several years under Rick Carlisle, who not only coached the Mavericks to a huge upset NBA title over the Miami Heat while he was with the Dallas Mavericks, but just this year he took the Indiana Pacers on one of the most improbable runs to the finals in NBA history, coming up potentially one devastating injury away from winning the most improbable championship in the history of the league. And Tyler Marsh has also worked with Becky Hammond, a great women's coach who has had a ton of success with the Las Vegas Aces. Tyler Marsh was there for those 2 championships, and everywhere he's gone, people really respect his work ethic. They respect his mentality. They respect his philosophies. And you can take a look at what's happened so far this season and say that it's been a disappointment so far this season. But you can look at the process of hiring Tyler Marsh, I think, and say that the front office did everything in their power to make the right move. And I'm hopeful that things will continue to get better and it will be the right decision in the long run. But I at least respect the front office's process towards trying to find someone who's very well respected, has a lot of great experience, and really checks all the boxes that you'd want to look for in terms of hiring a head coach. So I'm not going to give him a pass for that necessarily, but in taking a process versus results look at it, it's an okay move. But you can also look at a number of the other decisions they made, and especially in terms of the roster this year, that I think did not have the right process. Obviously, I've talked about this a million times, and it's probably going to come up again just because it's a really frustrating move, and I'll just never understand why it happened. But the Ariel Atkins trade. Now, Ariel Atkins is probably the 3rd best player on the team this year. She's, like a lot of players, been playing much better recently. She's getting more aggressive, looking for her shot, handling the ball a little bit more. But the process of making that decision was that this team is ready to win now, and so we're going to trade future assets for current assets, which is not the right process for this team. And we've seen that play out because this team is clearly not ready to win. And even as they're getting better, I think if this team played as well as it possibly can, this just is not a talented enough team right now to be a championship contender, in my opinion. And you have to be honest with yourself as the front office, as the coach. And it's really hard. This is a struggle you find in lots of different places, but especially in athletics where you've got a lot of people who are huge competitors. And as a competitor, you always believe that you can do anything. And whoever's stepping on that court across from you, you're going to go out there and you're going to win because you work hard and you know that you can do anything you set your mind to. But especially on those upper levels of the team management, you have to be able to take an honest look at the team. And it's like, anytime like you're out getting a job or any of these things, you have to have that moment where you're chasing your dream, you're chasing that new job, you're chasing that goal. And how much are you going to give up? How much are you going to sacrifice? How far are you going to go and let things go before you have to take a look in the mirror and say, well, maybe this isn't the way, right? And that's really hard to do. That's really hard to do. As humans, we're not really wired that way, especially as competitors. And it's hard to do, to be able to, because it feels like admitting defeat, but it's not. Right? You got to take this front office, got to be able to take a look at this team and say, hey, we got some really skilled and talented players on this team. We got some great women who work really hard, but we're just not there yet. And we want to be able to put as much talent together as we can so that we can be that competitive championship team for as long as possible. And you have to be honest with yourself for what that looks like. And right now, the team is just not there. And I hope that the front office can take a look at what's happened this season and just realize where they are, and that now is the time to emphasize future assets and assets that can grow alongside Angel Reese and Camilla, so that when they're ready to win, everyone's ready to win. Because we're getting the best years of Ariel Atkins right now. She's 29 years old. She's not that old, but as good as Angel and Camilla are, they're not ready to be, I don't think, the best and second best players on the championship team, and they might not be for another couple of years. And by that time, Ariel Atkins is going to be 31, 32. And this is just, even though I still think she'll be an effective player at that time, this is just not the stage of a player's career where people tend to make drastic changes and drastic improvements. They tend to stay level, and then you gradually tail off as you get older. That's just the natural way of things. And so when you bring in this player instead of a younger player, whoever this guy might have taken with that third overall pick, it just kind of makes things, your decision making, a little more challenging. So even great teams, great front offices, they're not perfect. These things happen, but I hope that seeing how this season has started, the front office can be honest with themselves and be honest with the team, and you want to get everyone on the same page. Because you can take a look at Washington, who's from the top down. You listen to interviews from the general manager, who's literally like, yup, we're not necessarily focused on this season. We're focused. We have they got to talk around it a little bit, because you can't just come out and say like, yeah, well, we're not really trying to win this year. We don't care about winning game. That you can't say that, but it's talking about having a growth mindset, talking about development focus, and bringing in all these young, talented players who, by the way, playing super, super well. And that trickles down to, okay, we know this is what we want, so who are we going to hire as a coach? Well, we're going to hire someone who came from the Chicago Sky, by the way, who has experience in player development. And we're going to bring in lots of young players with some, veterans here and there to help kind of emphasize their growth, and not ones that are going to take away from their minutes that they need to develop. And we're going to have the expectations for this team are not not to win games. So they're able to go out there and play loose and play free. And they don't have that same burden that a team like the Chicago Sky has that feels that pressure to win, even when they might not necessarily be in the best position talent-wise to compete at the level that they're expected to. And so having that same message and being on the same page all the way through the organization, that is how you can really develop a championship organization. And so I hope that this can be an opportunity for the front office to kind of really figure out what it is they want from this team and to be able to see where this team is, which is really important coming into 2026, where there's going to be a lot of changes. We don't know who's going to be on this team next year. We don't know what contracts are going to look like. We don't know where anyone's going to go. I think Ariel Atkins is really the only player on this team that's not under their rookie contract. I have any kind of thought that would be coming back, just because the team gave up so much for her that letting her walk after one season would be pretty ridiculous. But at the same time, you don't want to pay her like whatever she wants. You don't want to, chase bad money, double down on it. So, and we don't know what the contracts are going to look like. So we'll see. But you got to be on the same page. And as the league continues to get popular, I think a lot of owners are figuring out, and we'll see the Sky owner can figure this out, but are you really serious about this? Are you serious about owning a team and running a professional sports team to win? And what does that mean to you? And we're going to find out this offseason. Like, are they willing to spend, like, if you want this team to win now, are you willing to spend the money to bring in real players who are going to make a difference, real stars that are going to make a difference? Are you willing to do that? Or alternatively, are you going to take a look at where the team is now, and are you willing to be patient and bring in that young talent? Because I think the best way to win a championship is to bring in homegrown players. That's where you really allow the fans to make that connection. It's great to win a championship when players come in and you get a big boost and all that sort of stuff. As a Celtics fan, right? 2008, that was a great year, a great era of Celtics history, the big three with Ray and KG and Paul Pierce. And they, KG means so much to the Celtics, even though he only played there for a few seasons, because of what he brought to those teams. But you can take a look at, right behind me, 2024 NBA championship. That was really, really special, because you get Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, who have been with this team, been with the Celtics for their entire career. You see them come from those rookies to all the way to those All-NBA or MVP candidates that Jason Tatum is. And that's really, really special. Really, really special. And it's what allows you to compete for a longer period. Generally, if you're bringing in established stars, they're going to be a little bit older on that second half of their career, and you don't get as many years of competition. But when you have those younger players, those homegrown players, it generally allows you to compete longer. So is the front office going to be patient enough to do that? Or are they going to be willing to pay enough to bring in the big stars that can help them win now? Or are they going to go the easy route and just kind of, we're going to bring in a couple of decent players like those Ariel Atkins. Ariel Atkins is a great player, works very hard, has a great mentality. But bring in those kinds of players that are names, borderline all-star players. That this is how the Chicago Bulls run their franchise and have been for the better part of the last 25 years. Bringing in some names that'll help put butts in seats, and you're going to be around 500 every year and never really compete for anything else. That's the easy way. So the front office really needs to decide, like, who do you want to be as the WNBA grows? And are you really serious about running a franchise? And I hope that they are, because, as I said before, Angel Reese is a real difference maker. And I think she has the potential to be one of the greatest players in the history of the W. And I just don't. It would really suck if a player like that has to spend the first half of their career on a team that doesn't take shit seriously. I don't want that to happen. So we'll find out. We will find out. Whew. Okay. See, how are we on time? Damn, 45 minutes? All right. Well, I thought this was going to be a classic, nice little 30-minute run through like I've had the last couple episodes. That's where I want most of the episodes to be. But just because it's been so long since the last episode, there was a lot to talk about. But we'll wrap up a little bit with WNBA news, and already talked about the Ariel Atkins trade a lot, but Sonia Citron just continues to have a great season for the Mystics, and in fact, a lot of rookies have been really, really good this year, and as I mentioned earlier, it's just played into that narrative that I've seen that these college players are coming in with so many more resources available, so much more experience. They're so much more developed skill-wise. They're more developed physically, and it's allowing them to compete a lot quicker than rookies have in the past. You can even look not only up and down the first round, right? Sarah Ashley Barker in LA that the Sky just played. Paige is having a solid year despite the Mystics struggling. Kiki Irifan also in DC having a great year. Haley Van Lith here in Chicago has had some really great moments. So had some struggles, some rookie struggles too, but had a lot of really great moments too. Even in the second round, Tahina Pau, which was a player that a lot of places were thinking the Sky might draft, ended up going to Atlanta, and she's given them really solid minutes in the second round. You don't see historically a lot of second round picks making an impact at all, much less in the first year of their career. And so I just really think it's worth pointing out because it's really cool to see it. It speaks to the growth, the continued growth of the game. And just a little reminder, front office, I know you guys are listening, but the front office, hey, draft picks more valuable than ever, not only because they are cheap, right? If you want to be a classic cheap front office, which most front offices are, draft picks are cheap. And they're going to get more expensive under the new CBA, but they're still going to be cheaper than veterans because that's just how contracts work. But they're also better players than they've ever been. So let's keep that in mind. Sun Fever, I mean, I kind of already talked about this at the beginning, but, you know, Caitlin Clark, she'd be in the news. She'd be in the news because she is. There were some scuffles there. You know, it was a little bit of pushing and shoving. Caitlin Clark got involved. And then Sophie Cunningham took revenge out on the Sun player that poked Caitlin Clark in the eye and basically clotheslined her while she was going up for a fast break layup, even though the game was over. Wild stuff. Super fun. You know, I always love when stuff like this happens. You know, so, boy, there's just no place in the game for stuff like that. I mean, this is just unbelievable. Can you believe what are we? This is just, you know, and it's really like, come on, it's fun to see stuff like this every once in a while. You know, you don't want to see it all the time. Like, we're here to watch basketball, but like, it's good to see every once in a while. You know, it's good, it's a little competition. And again, it's showing, you know, the Sun are a really frustrated team right now because they're really struggling. They're kind of directionless right now. That is one of the good things about the Skies. It's like, again, made some questionable decisions this offseason, but they've got a great draft pick, hopefully coming up next year, because while they don't have their own draft pick because of the Angel Reese trade, which is worth it, they do have the Suns pick. And the Sun are really bad. So, hopefully, the Sky will have a really great pick next year. And just going to try not to think about the fact that they could have had Angel and Camilla and the third pick 2025 and a good pick in 2026. Boy, wouldn't that have been a really special young core to watch grow together, huh? if they're all good. I mean, that's the way the draft goes sometimes. If you have a high pick in the W especially, high picks have generally been pretty consistent at developing, not necessarily into a star all the time, but at least into a competent player. But draft can be a bit of a crapshoot sometimes. So you want as many bites of the apple as possible. Maybe you have those 4 picks and one of them doesn't work out, but from this draft, seems like he could have taken basically anybody, and they probably would have worked out because basically everybody's playing great. Hopefully next year we see something similar so that whoever the Sky pick, they turn out to be really great too. But regardless, that's in the past now. We're not going to have that pick anymore. But we still have Angel Reese and Camilo who are kind of driving the team. And we have a chance to add some more young talent next year. The Sun, who knows what they're doing? Who knows what they're doing? And they're getting frustrated, starting stuff. We're not seeing that from the Sky, which is great. But that was just a big story, so I felt like I had to mention it. Wrap up real quick with the standings. All the way at the top, Minnesota Lynx 12-2, just lost a shocker recently to the Mystics, I believe, is who it was. Gotta scroll. Oh my gosh, June. Okay, we're in June. What day is it? 24th. Okay, they just lost to... Yeah, they lost to the Mystics. They scored 64 points. Ugh. What the heck? That's crazy. Although, they are missing Nafisa Collier, who has been injured. So that's, again, talking about injuries. It's been a lot of injuries. So 64 points is crazy. But they're still number 1, 12-2. 10-3, New York Liberty at the number 2 spot. The Phoenix Mercury playing great right now. 5-game win streak, 11-4. They're playing incredible basketball, including a recent destruction of the Sky. The Liberty have lost 2 in a row. 1 to the Mercury, and then 1 to the Storm, who we'll get to in a second. The Atlanta Dream just 1 game behind the Mercury at 10-5, but they just dropped a rough one last night to the Wings. The Seattle Storm at 5th at 9-6. So to me, that's really kind of the top selection of teams. The the king of the crop. The Lynx, the Liberty, the Mercury, the Dream, and the Storm. We'll see. We'll see if they're up there. But I think they're up there in that top echelon. And I don't think the Sky can get up there right now. But then we've got this next mix of teams. 6 in the league, the Valkyrie, 7-6. That's who the Sky are playing next. Fever, 7-7. Mystics, 7-8. And the Aces at 6-7. All these teams hovering right around 500, and this is the area that I would love to see the Sky be able to break into, to be able to say that, you know, we're not maybe the best team in the league, but we're a competitive team. We can come in each and every night, give your team a run for their money, and if you're in that mix of those teams in around 500, you're competing for one of the lower playoff spots, which is where I think this team can be. You go out of that, you get to the Sky at 10th at 4-10, the Sparks at 11th at 4-11, the Wings at 12th at 4-12, and the Sun all the way down to the bottom, right where we want them, at 2-12. 6-game losing streak. Oof. No wonder they're starting fights. So again, Sky do have the Suns draft pick next year, so hopefully they stay bad and the Sky get a great pick next year. That would be sick and would almost make up for the highly questionable Ariel Atkins trade. Oh, gosh, it's just so hard to forget what could have been. I mean, hopefully the Sky get a great player and Haley develops, Angel develops, Camilla develops, that new player develops, and it's just a great team and they win couple championships and we forget about it all. But there'll always be that one part when I'm old and sitting in my rocking chair at the old folks' home and be like, yeah, but do you ever think that they could have won more championships if they hadn't made that one trade? That'll be me. But let's hope the Suns stay down there at the bottom. In the sky, let's hope that they can push their way up. They got an interesting stretch coming up here. They're going to be without Camila Cardoso for the next 2 weeks or so. So it's going to be a little bit tougher sledding, but they've still got some very winnable games coming up here. Now I'm trying to get back to where we were. So coming up next, as I mentioned, is that game against the Valkyries, which, again, this team so far has been a big surprise. They've played a lot better than the Chicago Sky. They're also missing a number of key pieces from Eurobasket right now, so I still think it's a winnable game. It's definitely one that if Cardoso was playing, I would say definitely a winnable game. It's going to be a little bit more challenging without her, of course, but I still would like if the Sky could beat Golden State, easily the best one of their season. It is on the road, so it's going to be tougher, but I think it's a game they can compete in. Then on Sunday, the 29th, they play the Sparks again, this time on the road. Even without Camilla, very winnable game. Very winnable game. I hope that they can take care of business there. Sunday, July 6th, on the road against the Lynx. Very tough one. We'll see if Nafisa Collier is back by then, but even without Nafisa Collier, very tough game. It would be great to see. That could be a big statement win if they come out with that one. But even without Nafisa Collier, the Lynx are a very tough team to play, especially at home. And then July 8th against the Mystics on the road, but still against the Mystics. Again, this is a team in that middle area that I'm hopeful the Sky can compete with. And then the 9th, Wednesday the 9th, could potentially be the first game back for Cardoso. I believe Amara Hoops, Amara Basket, AmeriCorps, whatever the competition she's in, finishes on like the 7th or the 8th. And so I'm thinking maybe the July 9th at home against the Wings could be her first game back. If not, is going to be Saturday the 12th against the Lynx, which, again, tough game. The Sky play the Lynx like 3 times in 2 weeks, which is pretty crazy. But you take a look at that stretch, the Valkyries, the Sparks, the Lynx, the Mystics, and the Wings. Now, it's unfortunate that this is fortunate and unfortunate in some ways that this is the stretch that Camilla is missing. Because if Camilla was here, I would say that the Sky have a really great chance to win 3 or 4 out of these 5 games with who they're playing. It would be a really great stretch to really gain some momentum against some teams that are very beatable and really kind of get some positive momentum as you start to head towards the All-Star break. Without Camilla, it's definitely going to be a bit more of a struggle. I still am hopeful they can win at least 2 of these games. If they win 3 out of those next 5, I would be, without Camilla, I'd be very, very happy. Very, very happy. I mean, that would still be easily the best stretch of basketball this team has played this year, winning 3 out of 5. But I'm thinking without Camilla, it might be looking more like a 2 out of 5, 3 out of 5. If Camilla was here, I think it could have been 3 or 4 out of 5, which would have been just really great to see this team put together a stretch like that. But maybe I'm being too rosy regardless. But I think a pretty winnable stretch of games coming up here. So hopefully the next time I bring out an episode, we're talking about a lot of wins and a lot of positive things that this team has done. But with that, oh my God, this episode is so long, almost an hour. Ugh. This is why I can't let it be so long in between episodes, because there just becomes too much to talk about. But I'm going to wrap this up for now. Again, if you're watching on YouTube, feel free to like and subscribe and share all that trash. If you're watching on Apple or if you're listening on Apple, feel free to give a rating or share it with your friends and family, whatever you like. But thank you for anyone who's listening, and we'll catch you guys real soon. Go Sky.